Hello, I'm Casey Aiken, and this is 21 This Week. Coming up next, Governor Moore proposes a millionaire's tax as quick fix for Maryland's $3 billion budget deficit. Montgomery County proposes a total ban on plastic bags. U.S. Supreme Court to hear Montgomery County LGBT storybook opt-out case. And doom casting. What can Montgomery County expect from the second term of Donald Trump? Our panel of insiders will give you the story behind the story. We're joined by the Secretary of the Maryland Republican Central Committee, Mark Uncapher, and former County Council member and CEO of SkillSmart, Mike Knapp. Stay tuned for these stories and more on the next 21 This Week. Alarm bells began ringing last fall when the Maryland State budget analysis was first released. And on the horizon, looming bigger than the iceberg that sunk the Titanic, was the projection of a $3 billion, that's right, that's what I said, $3 billion deficit. Mike, as the state wrestles with this big a deficit, Maryland's finances are in the red. What happened to the post-pandemic surplus that Governor Hogan left, and the $25 billion in federal COVID aid money that was allocated to the state?
Well, I mean, the challenge I think every jurisdiction had was that was all one-time money. And so it was just coming in as Governor Hogan left, and inevitably those dollars have to be spent. The challenge that I think really is, how do you spend those dollars as one-time resources on one-time things? And I think a lot of jurisdictions didn't do that and are now wrestling with the consequences, because that's the challenge. Once you start to provide services and you start to pay for those things, people start to expect that those services are going to be there. And so then what do you do? And so I think that creates a real challenge. And I think Maryland's not alone in addressing that. I think the other challenge that was there and has been there is we've had tepid economic growth in the state since the mid-2010s. And so as a result, I think that those dollars help to mask some of that problem. And so now, as those dollars have been spent down, you're back to where we would have been. And so now the challenge is, how do you create a pathway forward with challenges like addressing the blueprint and some significant investments that the state has made? And it's going to be a challenge. And I think the governor has put out a reasonable approach. I think when the alarm bells sounded, he was quick to jump in there and say something. And so I don't think there are easy ways to do it. And I don't necessarily know that I agree with everything he's put out there, but he's at least trying to meet the challenge head on.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head, Mike, exactly, because of the lack of economic growth in the state. I heard a terrible statistic. I didn't have a chance to vouch it and analyze whether it was accurate or not, but there's something like 134,000 jobs fewer in the state of Maryland than there was 10 years ago. I mean, it's just, you wonder what people are thinking about. And Mark, what are people thinking about? Governor Moore's new budget proposal would raise taxes on Maryland's wealthiest residents by adding 2 new brackets to make it more progressive at income thresholds the states previously didn't account for. Didn't any of the advisors tell Governor Moore about the millionaire tax debacle under former Governor Martin O'Malley?
Well, that certainly is part of our history, and it was a debacle. But if anything, it will be worse this go around. And let me just push back a little bit on what Mike said. States around Maryland have budget surpluses, and part of the issue is, and have been able to continue to cut taxes. West Virginia, for example, has cut taxes fairly dramatically. What those states didn't do was take that surplus, that COVID money, that one-time money that Mike appropriately referred to, and use it to kind of spend it as though it would continue forever. And that's the predicament that Maryland is in. Now, one of the challenges we have, unlike when the millionaire's tax went in with O'Malley, is that so many states around the country have gotten rid of the graduated income tax and cut their brackets down in order to be more competitive. So look at North Carolina, West Virginia, a variety of states that people have a tendency to move to. So we're now facing more competition, not just from the low or no state income tax states like Florida, but from other states that have dropped their brackets and therefore that much more competitive with Maryland for the, at least at the millionaire level.
So this is anecdotal, but what I heard yesterday, and again, I haven't had a chance to verify this, is that Maryland is considering changing the number of days that qualifies you as a Maryland taxpaying resident from 181 to 90. And if that's the case, I think you're going to see a huge exodus of wealthy people coming out. So Mike, what is the General Assembly going to do here? I hear, a lot of kick the can down the road, but there doesn't seem to be any lack of spending bills in the General Assembly.
Well, and there never is. That's one way I guess you can point to everybody. I tried to do something. I think the challenge is real. I think the governor has put some economic development issues within his budget, trying to make things more attractive from a corporate perspective. But I think given where the Trump administration is trying to go with the federal workforce, which would have a huge impact on the Maryland. But I think that I think that the General Assembly is going to have to be very cognizant that whatever they do has to reduce spending. There can't be a kicking the can down the road because there just isn't the economic growth to sustain it. And I think the variability of what the Trump administration may do to federal workers only exacerbates that situation. And so we've got to shore up for the future.
So my industry is real estate, both commercial and residential, and I know that we're very worried about the fact that they may try to increase transfer taxes on settlements. We did this a couple years ago, and if you talk about affordability of housing, you're just going to make it more unattainable for people. So this is a big issue that we're going to have to watch very closely as the General Assembly goes through their 90-day session. Now let's talk about my favorite topic, and that's the bag tax. I hate the damn bag tax. Excuse me for saying that, but I hate the bag tax. I've hated it since 2012 when Montgomery County first enacted a 5-cent fee on disposable bags. The goal was designed to not only deter residents from using disposable bags, but to help finance waterway cleanup efforts through the county's Water Quality Protection Charge Fund. And guess what, folks? It worked. About 2.6 million to 3 million was collected from the tax for that purpose each year between 2018 and 2022, when that was the last year we have good data. But in addition, according to an exhaustive 141-page study by Princeton PhD Tatiana Homnoff, the Montgomery County bag tax was a success in other ways. Consumer behavior changed. The council's experiment in social engineering worked. Mike, I hope you weren't part of that council. And according to Homnoff's finding, some 82% of Montgomery County shoppers used at least one disposable bag per shopping trip before the tax was imposed, compared to 40% who did so afterwards. So Mike, if the bag tax worked, why are we changing it now?
I think it's a really good question. I know that the county had a study that indicated that the bag tax was actually poorly implemented. So as it relates to your numbers about the amount of revenue that was captured, that number could actually have been significantly higher. And so I think from my perspective, if I were there, I think the first step really has to be, how do we implement what we have and make sure that's working really effectively? Let's maximize what that looks like. And to your point, if behaviors have already really begun to change, let's make sure we're generating that revenue that we anticipated. Let's continue to monitor that behavioral change, and then let's see where we are. And I'm not sure what's precipitating this now at this point.
Well, it's the threat of plastics in our system. They want to get
rid of plastic. We're already moving in that direction. It shows that fewer people are actually using plastic bags, more people are using disposable and reusable bags.
Yeah, I find, look, my primary reason for opposing it is the regressiveness of this tax. And I know there are mechanisms in the proposal that Kate Stewart and others have proposed that would allow SNAP recipients to avoid having to pay the tax. But I just don't think that's the solution. Mark, the shift to paper bags is not a simple transition. The cost of paper bags is not only higher than plastic bags, it may be as high as 10 to 12 cents per bag. And bags are inefficient means of carrying groceries. You want to walk 3 blocks carrying paper bags, they're all going to rip. So Who supports this nonsense other than keeping up with Katie?
Well, I think it's by definition one of the nuisance taxes. It's fascinating when you talk about the numbers of it's not a lot of money, but it's something that I think weighs heavily in consumers because it is this kind of aggravating, you may go in and spend $100 plus, but those extra nickels is just that much more irritating. Uh, what unfortunately what we need to next talk about are the delivery tax, but that's I guess for another segment.
Well, but I think
Well,
one of the interesting things is though, and I was surprised at this too, with the number of other jurisdictions that have actually gone down this road. I mean, Loudoun County, our neighbors to the south, who are not typically seen as the social engineers, as you like to say, Casey, that we tend to be in Montgomery County, have already implemented a more significant tax than we have, and have seen significant efforts there as well. So I mean, I think it's a laudable goal. I think we're seeing progress. I think we need to implement it more effectively. It needs to be the first step. But we're not alone in taking this effort, and lots of other jurisdictions are doing it too.
well, but Mike, they haven't banned plastic bags. And the whole, I mean, they may charge 10 cents as opposed to 5 cents, but they haven't banned plastic bags. And let's be realistic. If you go into a Macy's and you're buying goods and they don't put them in a plastic bag, you're going to be walking around with these paper bags, which are prone to break. I don't care how thick they are. They're prone to break. And it's just an inconvenience on consumers. I don't know why the county council hates people. They really do. They hate people driving cars. They hate people carrying their groceries.
I bought a pair of shoes and they were put in a nice paper bag that quite honestly was very durable. And my wife even kept it so we could use it again because it was such a good paper bag.
A
good example of that.
I think that's great. But when you go Christmas shopping and you got 6 of those bags you're carrying around, you're not going to be happy, Mike.
No, but your family will, because you just bought 6 bags worth of presents. So that's very good, very nice of you.
All right, so we're gonna leave it there. When we come back from this short break, the LGBT storybook opt-out case is going to go to the Supreme Court. And doomcasting. What can Montgomery County expect from the second term of Donald Trump? Stay tuned.
Jordan knows he shouldn't eat this entire bowl of nachos, but tonight he's earned that right. Because a few hours ago, in the middle of happy hour, he recognized a sign. Not from the gods or a bolt of lightning, but from a double heart, a kissy face, and a 4th ha in ha ha ha. That's when Jordan knew he was buzzed. So when it was time to go, he got a ride home instead of driving. Be a legend like Jordan. Recognize your buzzed warning signs and get a ride home. Buzz driving is drunk driving.
Welcome back. In 2023, when Montgomery County Public School System policy changed its curriculum to include in its general studies programs LGBTQ topics, it was challenged in court by parents who argued that public schools can't force kids to participate in instruction that violate their faith. And this case has been matriculating through the federal judiciary system ever since. Now, the United States Supreme Court announced it will review this in this term, an appeal from the court decision that went against parents in Montgomery County, Maryland. Mark, the parents claim that the policy violates their constitutional religious rights by not allowing them to opt out of lessons that include these storybooks. What do you think?
Well, I do think it's an appropriate to give parental, basically parental rights, more protections. MCPS has certainly been pushing the boundaries on that. I think, though, probably the larger issue is really the fact that our educational system is a kind of one-size-fits-all approach, and that a better solution would be to allow for more diversity of alternatives, charter schools and Hope scholarships and what have you, to give parents more input in the way their kids are taught.
Mike, what I don't understand is the school system allows an opt-out for sex education, but it doesn't allow it for the LGBTQ inclusion material. Why not?
Well, the sex education is a specific course that you sign up for, you don't sign up for. And this is actually, it's a general studies class. It's just reading and providing examples to students in classes of situations they'll see in everyday life. And so I think it's a really difficult thing to try to opt out of a reading class because we're all sitting in the class reading. And so I think that becomes really challenging and trying to figure out, well, this class used this book versus that class using this book on this particular day. And so I think administratively it becomes a real challenge. But I'm always fascinated by when we end up using religion as a way to segregate people and keep people apart, when, at least from a Christian perspective, which is what I am, Jesus was all about inclusion and bringing people together. And so I'm always kind of intrigued. We used it for race for many years. Religion was a great way to keep people apart. And I just don't understand why that's the approach that gets taken here. But it's the world that people see, and it's the world that they're trying to expose people to. And I think the way it's been structured has been, it's difficult to create an opt-out environment.
Well, you do know that the case was originally brought by Muslim families who objected to the teaching, and they're not alone in believing that homosexuality is not permitted in their Bible. So I think there is a religious foundation, and not just
Agreed.
to address this.
So, and I spoke to what I knew in that respect, and I think as I recall, what the case actually went forward was a number of different religions. It wasn't true in that respect.
Yeah, I mean, there was broad-based groups that opposed the inclusion of the material. So it'll be interesting to see how this is addressed by the Supreme Court, and when it finally gets up there. So let's go on to the most fun topic of the day. Okay. I mean, everybody, has been talking about it, at home. They've been talking about their dining room table. They've been talking about it in bars. I don't go to bars anymore, but they talk about it there, I'm sure. So in the 2.5 months since the November election, Maryland politicians have been assessing what the impact of the second coming of Donald Trump as president of the United States will have not only the state of Maryland, but locally here in Montgomery County. There have been some conciliatory statements from some, like Governor Moore, who, is very, very adroit and says, we'll work with the administration, but we do have reservations. And there have been some defiant statements from some, like State Senator Cheryl Kagan, who are more strident in their doom about and gloom about what will happen to the state. So, Mike, the doomcasters are predicting dire things from the Trump administration as to the impact on federal employment, the Maryland budget, and immigration. What's your assessment?
At least from what he's put out in his initial executive orders, he's trying to poke a stick at everything he can poke a stick at. That being said, and I count myself among these, I still struggle to see how the numbers for the election played out the way that they did. But there's a reality that we need to look at, which is clearly there's a majority of our population, both popularly and even more in the state of Maryland and in Montgomery County, who were supportive of him as voting for him for president. And so there's clearly something that we as a more predominantly Democratic state and Democratic county are not hearing and are not capturing. And I think there needs to be a way to step back and better understand that. And I think right now, both sides still seem to be whoever shouts loudest or rightest is the way to proceed. And I don't think that's a path forward for us as a society and as a community. And so I think that I think there will be real challenges. I think that the Trump administration will go after many programs that are specific to this region. And I think that's by design. That being said, I think we're going to need to we have to come up with more than just being on the other side and saying that's wrong and kind of doubling down and just yelling loudly, and come up with some real strategies that are very different and much more nuanced than we've done in the past in order to be able to advance the cause of our community.
Well, I think there are obviously a couple of big fears, but the biggest fear is probably on the state of federal employment here in Montgomery County, and in particular, and in the state of Maryland, the impact that will have on future budgets. As we discussed in our first topic, there's a $3 billion budget. We really need to sustain that federal employment. But the big topic, of course, is immigration. And, the General Assembly, as well as the county, has, positioned itself as not being cooperative on immigration. And Mark, for nearly 2 decades, Montgomery County has presented itself as a sanctuary county. Yet the other day, County Executive Mark Elrich stated in an interview with Montgomery Community Media that his policy was not to interfere with immigration officials performing their job.
We are not putting our police or our people between ICE agents and the people they're coming for. It wouldn't work. Everybody would be arrested immediately, and they would go ahead and do what they were going to do anyway. I don't, it's like you don't pick a fight with somebody you can't beat up. And we certainly can't do that. So I'm going to do whatever we can do. We're collectively can do whatever we can do to keep people safe. That's what we're going to try to do. But you will not find us standing between them and the people that if they actually try to take people. That's not something we can do.
Yeah, no, actually, I think that's consistent with where he's been before, which is sort of essentially non-cooperation. So it's, interfering would put the county in a more, to use the favorite phrase, problematic position. And so I think what I heard him say was that he's going to let not that he has a real choice, but he's going to let federal law enforcement do what they're going to do. What I didn't hear was that he was prepared to cooperate. So one of the issues that comes up is when there's somebody that ICE is looking for that is in jail already and about to be released, the level of cooperation that's going to take place, or the level of cooperation that, say, the police department can engage in. In some jurisdictions, they get more involved. They reach agreements with ICE. Montgomery County has chosen not to do that. So I did not see much of a change there. I think he just is slightly nuanced to be slightly less confrontational, sort of emphasizing a different aspect, a different side to the position that Montgomery County has taken out in the past.
Well, I mean, even though it may appear to be a nuanced statement from the county executive, it is a different statement.
Right.
It's not a defiant statement as we've seen in the past. And Mike, do you sense that there's going to be a change?
I don't think there's much of a change. I don't think he's necessarily poking the bear in it yet, but I don't think there's any effort there to cooperate either. And I don't know that necessarily should be. I think we're trying to make a statement with immigration. That played well in the election. We're trying to make it sound as though everyone who's an immigrant is a criminal. And unfortunately but I get that plays into the narrative. And so the reality is that we're going to have to figure out how to make this work, because they are a strong part of our population, and actually they're a strong part of our economy. And so especially if you're going to try to get rid of a number of federal workers for this to be able to put in political positions, it's going to have a significant impact and really have a dramatic impact on our broader economy.
Well, Mike, I mean, the one pushback I would say is that at least there have been statements that they're going to concentrate on those who are lawbreakers in the United States, not just from crossing the border, but have actually committed crimes in the United States that have harmed people, and that's going to be the first
maybe.
target.
I mean, I'll be curious to see, and at this point, they're also going after the million people that were brought in here with temporary status from the Biden administration. It's not clear necessarily where they're going, because they're just kind of talking about all of the different things that relate to immigration. And so it'll be very interesting to see what actually happens versus what the talk is.
Any final thoughts, Mark?
Well, I think that we're in a more polarized environment. The president has moved very quickly. If anything, he's, I think, learned from his experience the first go around, and has chosen to kind of go as fast as he possibly can, because he recognized that 4 years is a very short period in the grand scheme of things.
Well, you'll have the last word, Mark. Stay tuned for parting shots when we come back from the short break.
When I first saw a turtle, my heart was full. Now I'm anything but lonely.
We have this deep connection, this heart connection.
He just wants to be close to you and part of your life.
Every day with Turtle is a perfect day.
When I'm holding her, it makes me feel calmer.
I think everything he does shows how much he loves us.
When we adopt a shelter pet, we discover they're a little bit of a lot of things.
But they're all pure love.
Hey world, I have a quick message. It's about safe driving. All right, let's go. Anytime you're driving, have the seatbelt buckled tight. Both hands on the wheel and your phone out of sight. When not in your hand, trying to text somebody back. Because if you do, your car might get smacked. The moral of the story, just put your phone down. The people on the road will stay safe and sound. Put your phone down, put your phone down. People on the road will stay safe and sound. Yeah.
Welcome back. Now with parting shots, Mark Uncapher.
Well, Casey, I think over the years we've beaten the bag tax issue to death. Almost, because there's always some new wrinkle to it that we have to bring up again. But we now have another tax to talk about. Hopefully it won't go into effect, but it's the delivery tax. This is a proposal that's in the governor's budget that would create a tax on essentially Amazon or food delivery, DoorDash deliveries. If ever there was a tax that was extremely regressive, it's that. So I guess if they're not making enough money from people going out to the stores, they're not going to try and make money from people who are getting things delivered to them at home.
Well, let me just tell you, if they tax Amazon deliveries, I'm going to be broke because there must be 5 deliveries a day at my house. And I don't know what it's for. You know, I say, Nancy, it's Christmas for Nancy Aiken today. Anyway, Mike, I'm sorry, I'm taking up your time.
That's
Your
okay.
shot, please.
Well, I guess I'm always struck, especially this time of year, especially when it's cold. We've had bitter cold, not necessarily record setting, but how our community, our philanthropic community, our volunteer community steps up to the plate and really seeks out those folks most in need and ensures that whether it's warm clothing or food or shelter, but really to make sure those neediest among us actually get addressed. And I just want to thank all of them for their efforts over the course of this past month of January.
Good thoughts. Thank you so much. And thank you for appearing this week. And thank you, the audience, for tuning in each and every week to Montgomery County's hardest hitting political talk show. For 21 this week, I'm Casey Aiken.